Welcome back to Writing Done Right. And today we want to talk a little bit about software, and I want to talk a little bit about my philosophy on software and the places where you might go if you're looking for alternatives. So we're going to basically just be doing a random talking head about software, maybe give you a few tips and tricks. Thanks for checking out this video. I am Thomas Morosky, an author and a technology consultant. And today we do want to talk a little bit about software. And really, I wanted to talk about my philosophy. Of course, if you follow my channel, you know, we cover a lot of software that most of the people in the writing and authoring sphere are not specifically using, which is interesting. In fact, just in preparation for this, I wanted to go in and see what type of software people are using. So I just did some searches, clicked on the first link. It was to a very reputable blog, and they listed a bunch of software they use. I go, yeah, I wouldn't use that. Nah, I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use that. And then they actually have a list of software at the bottom saying, these are things we wouldn't recommend. Yeah, I'd use that. Yeah, I do use that. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do use that. Very interesting. What's going on? And a lot of this is we all have different thoughts and different opinions. See, there was a time roughly a decade ago when I was a very happy little web developer that occasionally was writing some books and stuff on the side. In fact, I think I had written my first book right about this time, a little over, I think it was right 12 years ago, if I remember correctly. And in that time, I was a little web developer. I was happy on my Windows 7 computer, and I was happy with my Adobe products. And I was just spinning up little websites and then doing things for clients, doing some writing, blogging, stuff like that. And then what happened is Windows 10. You see, like it or hate it, Windows 10 came on as a giant behemoth. And when I was seeing some of the things about it, like Windows 10, it collects a bunch of data, it sends it back to the company, and you can't turn all this kind of stuff off. And I'm a guy that I don't like that. Now, there's this argument about, do I have something to hide or not? And it's not anything like that. It's just, I don't want to be bothered, and I don't want to be caught up in somebody's data machine. And so I started examining this, and that's when I said, well, I don't really like the Mac ecosystem. Let's try this Linux thing out. And of course, around that time, I launched a channel dedicated to switching to Linux and free and open source software. And since then, I always take an open software approach first on everything I do. It's just a way for me to say, I'm going to resist all of your data collection. I'm going to resist a lot of these types of things I just don't like. I don't like a lot of the way the modern world moves, where everything is smartphone driven and account driven and authentication driven, and everybody knows exactly who's everybody. I'm a guy that's from the older school that says, I'm going to leave you alone, you leave me alone. And so I approach all of my software in that perspective. Now, I do get people on my channels where I talk a lot about this going, well, you can't do this with this software. You can't do that with that software. You're looking at a guy who's published a dozen books, who's very successful with video editing, a lot of other features. I run my I run two separate P&Ls for two completely separate businesses. One is a DBA, one is an LLC. And everything that I do utilizes free and open source software, from my accounting software to what I'm using to record this video to the operating system running on my computer. I just got fed up with just being pulled into some data collection machine. And part of that is a modern trend towards subscription-based software. Of course, Adobe switched to subscription-based stuff. I can't go in and buy an Adobe product at once anymore, just install it and be done with it. And okay, at least I got the Adobe software handled for a while. No, they moved all that to subscription. Microsoft is making a push to get Microsoft Office as a subscription software. They're still committed to at least one more release of the desktop buy once, have it on your computer version. But they really are trying to get everybody into their annual subscription services. And I look around at the bottom line here and say, you know, not everybody, especially in our current economy, not everybody can go around and be throwing $10 a month here and $20 a month there and $100 for this software and $100 for that software. And we get to this world where we're just assumed that we're just living on a constant thrush of payments to the point where Klarna can now be used to pay for your DoorDash meals in 4 easy payments. And if you need to pay for your burrito in 4 easy payments, I think you need to delete Klarna off of your app. It's probably not for you. With that as a general backdrop, I tend to look at software. Now, I am not as pure open source as other people in my sphere of open source software, but I tend to lean and prioritize open source where it is an option. This is why I haven't used Microsoft Office in a decade. I use LibreOffice. Even on the Windows computer I moved that over to LibreOffice. The early books, I think the Testing and Temptations, I think that one was written with only Office, if I remember, or not only Office, Open Office, if I remember correctly. And I think every book since then was written in LibreOffice. And that's really what I use for doing things. And, unlike that article that I read today that's wouldn't recommend LibreOffice because it's too limited and things like that, it's like I completely disagree. LibreOffice is more feature rich, including the ability to do Google Docs online collaboration. Although that is a little bit more difficult to pull off. It is still possible. I know I've done it. I don't actively have that system running right now just because I just don't use collaboration type things in that manner. But with that being said, looking at the options, if there is an open source option of some amazing software, I tend to look at using that, and I will go with the paid options only if I have to. And I will go with the proprietary options only if I have to. I make do, in other words. Like I started my businesses running QuickBooks. They just became very hungry for every bit of data. And really what a lot of these companies do, and the reason I don't like them, is they collect all of this data. And it's not just collecting the data for their servers. They collect the data so that they can sell it on other servers. They can sell it to other services. A classic example of this is many of you have probably seen either Life 360 or Gas Buddy. Those are two apps that people were heavily promoting. One of those, Life 360, you install it on your kids' phones. You can always see where your kids' phones are. Gas Buddy allowed you to install it on your phone, and it would always tell you where the cheapest gas is, where you are. These two applications were actually tied in with a company, and I forget their exact name, but it was a company created by Allstate, the insurance company, specifically to capture as much data, including geometric data, geographic data, sensors, how fast you're moving, things like that. Effectively, it's the same thing that about 5 to 10 years ago, a lot of insurance companies wanted to give you this little black box you put in your car, and then they would say, well, this could save up to 10% of rates. Of course, if you read the fine print, 10% of you would receive a cheaper rate, 10% of you would receive a higher rate, and the other 80% would stay exactly the same. But what they were doing is they were grabbing data about where you travel and your driving habits, like your accelerations, how quickly to accelerate, how much do you slam on the gas, how quickly do you take turns, and they were utilizing this data. And if you happen to fall on what they considered somehow their safest 10%, you would get that little discount. If you were the unsafest 10%, they would charge you more based on that little black box. And the 80% in between, there was no change at all. But it was a big ploy about data collection. And then they sold this data out to a number of their competitors as well. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people started getting a lot higher insurance rates in the last couple of years, because Allstate had created this data company that collected all this data. Well, nobody wanted to put those black boxes in your car and go, yeah, that's a little creepy. But everybody carries these cell phones, and if they just got you doing these free apps like Gas Buddy, just install it on there. Of course, to use it properly, you have to have location services set on, and it's collecting other information it had no business of collecting. They literally turn that little black box into a phone app on your phone and collected all the data anyway, and then use that data against its customers. That sounds crazy conspiratorial. And I'm like, I'm going to click this button. This guy's nuts. Look it up. It is a matter of court records. It is true. And for that reason, I don't like doing things a lot on phone apps, particularly unless they're fully sourced. I source all of my phone apps from a company called F-Droid. It allows you to install phone apps onto an Android system, and every application is completely vetted by security and privacy experts to make sure there's nothing in there. And if there is some wonky thing, they do tell you about it openly. But those are the things I do. But by and large, I don't have an addiction to my phone, and I don't like doing a lot of things on my phone. So by and large, I just don't do anything with my phone. So I do things with the computers. Of course, because of that data collection inside of Windows, I use Linux. I use Linux for everywhere. I know people are like, it's all this command line scary stuff and things like that. And the reality is it's not. It's not at all. In fact, this is my desktop. And, it's a system. I have all this software. All the software installed here is not only free as in money, but it's free as in people can view and edit the code. We can audit the code, and all this stuff I can install on my system, and I can do everything from Bible studies, these are two great apps. Blender is 3D rendering animation. GIMP does everything Photoshop can do. I have Jitsi over here for conferences, FileZilla. I have a number of different web browsers. These are all good features. This is a great operating system, and it works really well. No problems, no issues with it. And so I use that because the operating system, by and large, does not make any weird connections with any servers. It doesn't collect user analytics. It doesn't take screenshots of my desktop every 3 seconds and organize them inside of some OCR character thing that I can search what I was doing for the last 3 months. It doesn't force my hard drive to be encrypted, although most of my drives are encrypted by default. These are all reasons I just don't like the modern Windows implementations. And part of this, though, is that I want to use software that has the same philosophies. I don't want to install software that either doesn't work well on my system or software that is proprietary, because I just don't know what's going on under the hood. And that leaves me kind of the topic of the video, because as we were chatting on our forum boards a couple of months ago now, somebody said, hey, do you ever consider using this software called Manuscript for running your novels and things that you're writing and things? So I was like, oh, I hadn't seen that one. So let me go ahead and have a look at it. Now, I've not yet looked at it. We are actually getting into the process of getting it installed, and I'll be doing my next short story with it to see how it works. But Manuscript is a software very similar to the most popular writing software that I've heard, and that is Scrivener. So, of course, Scrivener is, this is a writing system that allows you, and I have not used it to be perfectly clear. You can go in there, you can basically create character profiles, you can create storyboard profiles, organize your chapters, easily sort and find things, and then it's just going to give you a system to basically keep your thoughts organized. Now, a lot of people absolutely swear by it. I was reading some forum posts today about people asking opinions on it, and one guy who is just writes novels for a living, he's just like, I just don't waste my time with it. And that's where I'm at personally. I write my stuff in LibreOffice. And if you're writing properly in LibreOffice, you're not getting lost, because there's this thing called a navigation pane. I can go to every table, I can go to every picture, I can go to every chapter very easily in that navigation pane. And I've talked about that before. That being said, I do want to give a software like this a try, but when I went up there to have a brief look at it, of course, they have a good free trial. It's 30 days, 30 useful days. So use it every day, last 30 days. If you use it only 2 days a week. Okay, so I guess they've kind of backtracked a little bit. So 30 days of use. Okay, it was 2 days a week. It lasts 15 weeks. Okay, so 30 specific days. They have not backtracked anything. 30 times you basically can open it and use it, and it's free. They have an iOS version. They have a Windows version. They have a Mac version. And what's sad about it is there's no Linuxy version. That makes me sad. So what I wanted to do is, of course, Manuscript is a version of this, which is, I believe this was fully cross-platform. So that means that it's available on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So here's your Linux information. So it looks like I can simply install it. I don't have to do anything weird. Here's your Windows versions. Here's your Mac versions. Looks like they do not have phone versions that I can see. So this looks like it can do about everything that Scrivener can do. But the question is, let's say you're using software and you're thinking, man, he's saying something. What this guy's saying kind of makes a little bit of sense. Maybe I don't want my software constantly collecting things. Not that I'm doing something nefarious. I just don't want to be involved in somebody's ad making machines, whatever else. What do you do to find software? And I do want to show you one of my favorite websites is called Alternative 2. It is alternative2.net. They have thousands and thousands of pieces of software, and you can simply type something in here and find the alternatives, and then you can sort it by license types and operating systems and platforms and things like that. So let's just go to the most common, of course, is Word. So if you do Word, let's do Microsoft Word. There you go, Microsoft Word. So it tells you about Microsoft Word. It gives you some basic reviews, and it's going to give you some alternatives. So this is the best Word. Here's the actual page about Word. So it gives you basic information. It tells you what platforms it works on over here. It gives you a lot of the feature integrations over here. And then we have news, if there's news feeds. Recent activities, there's comments and reviews. So here's a top positive comment. Here's a top negative comment. Negative comment is from 2016. Wonderful. Interesting. So apparently people like it. You know, they talk about it. They have one-time price ranges from 100 to 500, subscriptions between 5 and 13. I think those pricings have gone up a little bit. And you'll see the licensing. It is a proprietary and commercial product. And so you might say, I'm a little weary about Microsoft Word, or, hey, there's really software that works just as good that I don't have to shell out a monthly subscription service or maybe even an annual one. So you hit the alternatives button and it will rank them out. So LibreOffice is, of course, the one I use. And it can do practically everything Microsoft Office can do. There's a few things that it can't do. We're talking the upper 1% that almost nobody will ever use. But they also have a lot more features that's built in that Microsoft Office can't do. I use this not only for writing, but for formatting and all my interior designs. So you can have a look at the tutorials I have on this. You can see over here the various platforms. And you can actually come up to here, and this is where you can sort by the various tags and things. So you can sort, let's say I want something just for Mac. I click on the Mac button here, and it will show me only the things that work in Mac. Of course, LibreOffice does. OnlyOffice works for Mac. Apache OpenWriter, WPS, TextMaker. So these are all going to be things that will run on the Mac. And then they'll tell you here the licensing and stuff like that. So if I take the Mac off, let's say in my case, I want to see something that's Linux, and I also like open source. Now, free and open source are slightly different things. We're not going to get into what the differences are. So if I say free I say open source and Linux, what shows up? LibreOffice, of course. OnlyOffice shows up. I have a couple videos on this one. It's not my cup of tea. There's some things it does well. It matches the UI of Windows. If the UI is a hang-up for you, OnlyOffice is very good with the UI functions. I did find that there's a lot of features in both Microsoft Office and LibreOffice it doesn't do. Like you can't do regular expression searches through documents, which means you can't search for double spaces easily. You can't search for return characters very easily. And there's a few other things I didn't like about it. Here's Apache OpenWriter. I don't generally recommend this one anymore because it's just been so long since I've had major features. And you'll see Alternative 2 will tell us this information. Discontinued last major release. Here's AviWord. Again, discontinued last major release. This is where it's getting into, this is not quite the same, but okay. And then we're getting into this. So you'll see that I am a lot more limited here on the open source and Linux. You'll notice like the WPS Office wasn't there. Well, that's because WPS Office, which was on a previous list, is not actually open sourced. It is a proprietary. It is free to download, but it is not open source. So these sorting features work really well. So let's go ahead and type in our writing thing we started with Scrivener. So if we type in Scrivener here, let's go more about Scrivener so you can see what it is. You can see where it comes from, what's the application type. You can see it's paid, it's proprietary. Some people are saying now they did have a Linux version in the past. They've dropped support for it. There is still an app image if you're on Linux that is out there, and I'll have a look at it when I can. But with Wine here means that I should be able to play it on Linux with Wine if I wanted to. If I was really committed to it, I can probably make this guy work. And you can see the features that it has and other information. Here's the pricing between 50 and 52. I thought it was a lot more price than that. This pricing might be a little out of date. I thought, if I remember correctly, I thought it was over 100 or something these days. I don't know. What is it? Let me see the pricing. Let's go. Scrivener, buy now. Okay, it is 50. All right. I thought it was more expensive than that. This is standard Windows. This is educational license. So it's $10 cheaper with an education. So, okay. So it looks like these prices are fairly accurate. Maybe have gone up just a little bit. So if you wanted to see, there's the official website showing the alternatives. You'll see the first alternative is this manuscript that somebody told me about. So I'm actually going to try this out. It is the first, and some people are saying there's a lot of similarities to them. So here's your chapters, of course. Here's your projects. Here's your cheat sheet, navigation. I actually really curious to get this guy installed and see what I can do with it. Oh, word count goals over there. I hope I can export something in a better format than that. Here's nice. Yeah, there's a lot of cool features in here. So that looks interesting, but there's other ones. There's YWriter. Look good. This one, though, you'll see is freemium and proprietary, and I don't see a Linux version for it. Here's Zettler. This is free open source. There is a Linux version for this one. So let's see what this one looks like. So it looks like if you can read German, okay. This one here does have a few other features in it as well. LaTeX is in there. I didn't do a lot of LaTeX discussions, but the idea here is that you can come into here and say any type of software you might happen to be looking for. FileZilla, for example, is a FTP client that I happen to use for Linux. So here's all the alternatives for that. So any type of software you're looking for, if you're using some software in your life and you are kind of frustrated with it or you want to see if there's a better way, you can go ahead and do that. And then you can just go through and sort by the different licensures and things like that. This really does give us a lot of food for thought to think about what we can do about the software, how our software functions, what we use it for, things like this. So ultimately, that's kind of the word I wanted to leave with you. Just thinking about the software. It may not matter to you. You might be like, I like this software. I'm going to keep using it. And that is perfectly fine. Absolutely perfectly fine. I just know for me in my house, I'm not messing with software that collects a bunch of data and things like that. I just don't want to deal with any of that. So that's really what makes my software choices tick, and where you can go and look for alternative software if you're using something, you're frustrated with it, or you just want to see if there's a better choice, a better option, or you just want to learn about new software. Alternative2.net is an excellent resource. I definitely send you there to look for anything that you're looking for. With that, thank you guys for watching, and I hope that we have helped you to get your writing done right.